People with disabilities have been rejected for thousands of years. The belief was that people with disability were going to breed. This would affect the genes of the whole population. And that was the start of the major institutions, was to stop people breeding. And so there's a huge amount of incarceration of people. When I first started was as a mental retardation nurse in a huge institution. And it really was Alcatraz. And at that time, to have an intellectual impairment meant a life sentence without parole. No education whatsoever. And in fact, the staff ratios were such that you had to employ more competent people to help you look after less competent. Up to 1979 in WA, and it was similar right around the country, if you had an IQ below 50, you were not allowed to go to school by law. You were deemed ineducable, and as such, you were the responsibility of parents to actually educate you, and the education department could check if you were doing a good job. What happened in the early 70s was a parent group called Watchdog started in this state, and they started advocating for the right to education for all children. There was a series of investigations into that and a lot of roar about it in the press, because the initial report came out saying no, they really shouldn't be educated, and actually an academic from Edith Cowan stood up against that in the press to some cost to herself personally. That changed in 1979, so we then got people to go to school. The actual curriculum of that time was fundamentally about social skills. Now, of course, that hasn't changed in this special education system. We're still talking about life skills, not about maths and education and so forth. The second issue, which was the key issue for families, was the social inclusion. In other words, they wanted the child to have friends. And so there's been some major moves on in that direction about how you actually bring in buddy systems and way to make sure that the child's included. And thirdly, we've got to actually include the child in the same curriculum material as all of the other children. There's a fourth component, which is also part of the social, which is they need to be included in the same rules. If you think about what's actually happened over the last basically 40 years, it's massive. And I suppose the question for the next generation is, what are you actually going to do to actually carry this on and to carry this through into the future? Because it's not going to happen by itself. It really takes a lot of effort and a lot of commitment. So I hope that you'll actually take up the challenge and think about these sorts of issues.